Welcome to this video on measuring and minimizing harvest losses in soybeans. Hello, I am Curt Hoffbeck, field agronomist with DuPont Pioneer in eastern South Dakota and southwestern Minnesota. Soybean combine losses can be as much as 15%, and almost 80% of soybean harvest losses occur while cutting and gathering plants into the combine. Pre-harvest losses like shattering are one of the most common losses that occur and are often due to drought stress, harvest delays, and sometimes even seeds swelling in the pods after a rain once they are physiologically mature. Pod clipping by insects can also account for pre-harvest losses. According to the University of Wisconsin, there's almost a 2 to 3% increase in harvest losses for every 2 weeks of harvest delay. Harvest losses can also occur through mechanical means, and those are losses as a result of gathering, also known as cutter bar losses, and machine losses. So let's talk about some of the tools you will need to measure harvest losses in soybeans. First off, some safety apparel, whether it be a hat, jacket, or gloves. When the equipment is in the field, it's always good to be safe. In addition to that, a good pair of safety glasses. This will help keep dust and debris out of your eyes. I also carry with me a tape measure, some stakes, a string or rope, a 1-foot square. I made this one out of PVC, and a 10-foot square. You can make this out of wire or PVC as well. It's important to determine gathering harvest losses behind the grain head when combining. Simply combine and back up about 20 feet, and then take a 10-foot square, and about 5 to 10 feet behind the standing soybeans, count the number of beans or pods on the ground in that 10-foot square area and calculate the bushels lost per acre. This will help you determine the proper travel and reel speed. Harvest losses in soybeans are most commonly determined by counting the number of beans in a 10-foot square area and dividing that by 10 and dividing that by 4 to get the bushels lost per acre. An example here would be if I had 40 seeds in a 10-foot square area here, that would be 1 bushel loss per acre. It's important to make loss determinations at several locations in the field, ahead, at, and behind the combine. Remember safety when doing this. Give yourself plenty of space, disengage and lower the header, shut off the engine when making adjustments. It's important to measure losses before the grain head in standing soybeans for pre-harvest losses, such as shattering. In this case, you'd want to count any seeds or pods on the ground. A rule of thumb is using a 1-foot square. 4 beans per square foot is 1 bushel loss per acre in soybeans. As a side note, 2 kernels per square foot in corn, 3 in sunflowers, and 17 to 18 in wheat equals approximately 1 bushel loss per acre. It's also important to measure losses behind the combine. In order to do this, I typically use the rope or string method.
For an 8-row head, I am going to mark out a 10 square foot area here using my string, and that measurement would be 20 feet by 6 inches. This will cover the width of the head. If you have a larger 30-foot head, the dimensions for a 10 square foot area using the string would be 30 feet by 4 inches.
I'm going to go through and count the number of seeds within this area to determine harvest losses. If I had 40 seeds in this area, I would simply divide that by 10 and divide that by 4 to get the bushels lost per acre.
It's important to measure losses behind the combine to measure losses as a result of combine settings, as well as the total mechanical harvest losses by subtracting that from your initial pre-harvest losses. This will pinpoint where adjustments can be made in the combine.
So what are some averages and goals when it comes to soybean harvest losses? We know that soybean combine losses can be as much as 15%. Careful management and proper settings can help reduce harvest losses to about 3% or 1.5 bushels per acre. That'd be the equivalent of 6 beans in a square foot in a 50 bushel per acre crop. Here are some tips to reduce harvest losses in beans. First off, harvest beans as soon as they reach 13 to 15% in moisture. This will reduce shattering and increase your overall yield and profit. An example is if you harvest beans at 9% moisture versus 13% in a 50 bushel crop, that would be the equivalent of losing 2.2 bushels per acre or close to 0.6 bushels per 1 point of moisture below 13%. Here's some other tips to reduce harvest losses in soybeans. Consider air reels in your system or draper heads. Auto steer also has its advantages. When plants are potted up short to the ground, keep your cutting bar low and consider rolling your soybean fields to allow for smoother travel. An example for cutting height is if you keep your cutting bar 3.5 inches above the ground, that will equate to about 5.4% yield loss. If you increase that to 5 inches, that could increase to 9.4% yield loss. Your forward ground speed should be about 3 to 4 miles per hour. Slow down on uneven surfaces, and your reel should operate about 25% faster than your ground speed. Your reel axle should be about 6 to 12 inches ahead of the sickle in most cases. The tips of the fingers on your pickup reel should clear the cutter bar by about 2 inches. Operate the cylinder at the slowest speed that will give complete thrashing to reduce splitting. Increase the rotor or cylinder speed when beans are tough and slow down the rotor or cylinder as beans begin to dry. It's always important to refer to your operator's manual for the best combine settings and adjustments. In summary, while some grain loss is expected during harvest, mechanical harvest losses should be monitored often and kept to a minimum. Minimizing harvest losses can occur by making adjustments to the combine operation, and properly scheduling the harvest timing of each field. Have a good harvest.